Blessings and good evening on this Tuesday night. It's a question and answer session, so we have a few questions have come in. First question. Dear Ajahn, I've heard a monastic teacher suggesting lay practitioners to see every aspect of life as part of the practice, rather than as an obstacle to advance on the path. I quite like that approach. Would you agree? If so, will you be able to give a few practical advice on how we should implement this? Example, when we are not at the monastery, not doing dana, but with families, friends, at work, doing some activities, or by ourselves. Well, ultimately we have to see every aspect of our lives as part of the practice, because the Buddhist path is about cultivating the causes for the end of suffering and abandoning the causes for stress and suffering from your mind. And that has to be something that's like an ongoing, continuous practice until the job is done. You can't really do it as an occasional thing very effectively. Can't just be a kind of a hobby or something you pick up and put down, because your mind, which is the real source of the problem, and the delusions, the attachments in our mind are the source of our suffering, that goes with you everywhere. It's not like when you leave the monastery, your mind stays in the monastery and it doesn't matter what happens next until the next time you return to the monastery, and then you start practicing again. Although a lot of people tend to be like that. If you think about it, of course, your mind is with you 24 hours a day. So everything you do is reflecting your state of mind and influencing your state of mind. Wherever, whether you're with family or at work, or traveling or at the monastery or not. So in the end, our aim is to make everything fit within the practice, because we're training ourselves. We call this a training, dry sikha, so training in sila, and that particularly refers to actions, speech, our external conduct, the way we relate to the world, other people, the environment, material things, and so on. And then the training in samadhi, which is particularly developing right effort, right mindfulness, and then the factors of samadhi to bring up the clarity of mindfulness, clear comprehension, the peace, the happiness of samadhi, the unwavering, one-pointed nature of samadhi. And again, even though the factors of samadhi will tend to come up and then fade away again, unless one is already established, well established in the practice of meditation. Generally there'll be this sort of experience of periods of peace and concentration and mindfulness, and then lapses in mindfulness and the loss of concentration. That's quite normal. But nevertheless, it's an ongoing practice, and you're developing both your sila and your samadhi together to support training the mind to abandon the obstacles to samadhi, the 5 hindrances. And then the final sikha or training is training in wisdom, panya. So particularly developing understanding, insight into the Four Noble Truths. And again, that's not something you're just developing in the monastery or on a retreat. It's something you have to be developing in an ongoing way. It's just maybe on a retreat or in the monastery you're doing in a more concentrated way, more intense way. But when you're at home with family, you might say, well, I'm relaxing, and true, you tend, in those situations, you tend to be distracted and not thinking much or not consciously developing the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, perhaps. But you'll see, sooner or later, issues come up where your practice of the path, the development of sila, samadhi, panya is tested and requires you to bring the Dhamma up, even in your workplace, your family, and so on. You'll see suffering arising in your mind at any time. You'll notice your mind is sometimes more peaceful, sometimes less peaceful. You'll notice the kinds of karma you're making every day, how you speak, how you act, what you're thinking about, the intentions, the choices you make. It's going on all the time. So the more effort and the more we make the practice of Dhamma central to our life, you'll realize, well, it matters at all times. It doesn't mean to say you can't relax or move between different activities, move between work, family, socializing, the monastery or retreats. You can, but there are certain principles you're developing probably which become, if you're really aiming to develop the Buddhist path, there's some principles just become permanently established in your life. Like a basic requirement, you might say, is the 5 precepts. You don't just keep the 5 precepts in the monastery and then forget about it when you go home, although many people do that. You're aiming to develop the 5 precepts all the time. You undertake them as training rules, so whether you're at home, at work, in the monastery, you undertake not to kill, not to steal, not to commit acts of sexual misconduct, not to use lying or abusive speech, insulting speech, or idle chatter, and not to take intoxicants. These are practices you aim to, once you've committed to them and you see the value of them, you aim to keep them on all the time, wherever. And this is why a lot of people suffer. Say at work, there are situations that invite us to not keep the precepts, whether it's other people or just situations. Even at home, it's hard to keep the precepts, and situations tempt us to break them. But one fundamental part of practice is learning to try and keep them at all times. There are many other practices which come in to support that, so say who you associate with. So if you keep going out with people who drink, it's going to be very hard not to end up drinking yourself, say drinking alcohol. If you're associating with people who hunt or just kill animals and insects quite regularly and they don't see anything wrong with that, well, you're likely to end up following suit, aren't you? So who you associate with, how you spend your time, that plays a big role in the choices you make and your practice. Recognizing how you can develop mindfulness in all situations, even if you're working or socializing or resting, relaxing, you've always got an opportunity to bring attention back to your mind. So just very ordinary things like when you fall asleep at night, what state of mind do you have when you fall asleep? What do you do just before you fall asleep? Ideally, you're aiming to bring up that mindfulness, so you're aware of your thoughts and what's going on, because often the last thing at night or as we're falling asleep, you'll see a lot of different distracted states of mind, different problems you're having in your life will come up. And that's a very good place to bring up mindfulness and use some Dhamma to help deal with whatever's coming up in your mind. And wisdom, of course, is something you can be developing at all times. Using wisdom, particularly understanding the difference between good and bad karma, so you reflect on the consequences of your actions. So if you're at work and you're tempted to lie, maybe think about it first and say, I might regret this later. Keeping precepts brings you the happiness of freedom from regret. You don't feel bad about what you've said and done. You don't feel guilty. You don't have much self-aversion. When we don't keep the precepts, you do become regretful, sad about things that have happened, things you've said. You do often have more problems with other people and so on. Even though it's hard to keep the precepts, if you keep your mind focused on the value of the precepts, wisdom will grow from that, and you'll understand where the tendencies to break precepts come from, the more unwholesome states of mind: greed, anger, delusion, jealousy, competitiveness, conceit, arrogance, and so on. And you start filtering out and letting go of maybe certain mental states that undermine your practice of the precepts. You're changing yourself for the better. You develop hiriyottapa, shame, sense of shame, fear of the consequences of unwholesome mental states, unwholesome actions. So people generally who practice the Dhamma and regularly listen to Dhamma, reflect on Dhamma, will introduce these practices into daily life, and so they become more and more prominent in their thinking and their decision making. And they do things that support the practice of Dhamma. Where you can't change conditions, there may be unsupportive conditions in your life, like going to work and associating with people who don't keep precepts, or family members who don't keep precepts. Well, you have to be very patient and practice a lot of metta and tolerance, kindness with people who are looking at life in a different way. But it can be done. It's the story we often quote in the time of the Buddha, the wife who is, you might call a housewife, not working, not going out to work, but looking after the household, is living and practicing the Dhamma, has great faith in the Buddha, and she is considered to be a Sotapanna, stream enterer. Whereas her husband is a hunter by profession, by birth. He's born into a hunting family. So the way he earns his money, he goes out to hunt animals, brings them back for food and for sale. So this woman who's a Sotapanna, every day she cleans the tools, the equipment of her husband, the hunter, and sends him off with a packed lunch out to kill. So some of the villagers and Buddhist students of the Buddha had doubts. The Buddha has said this woman's a Sotapanna, but she's living with a hunter who kills every day for his living. How can that be? Maybe she is somehow complicit in this killing. So they asked the Buddha, and the Buddha calls her in to explain her way of practice. And she said, it's true, my husband's a hunter, don't deny it, but I have no intention to kill myself, and I have no intention to promote killing. But that's been his profession since before I knew him. In the caste system of India, often careers, professions, jobs are very limited and very fixed in society. And quite often these days they are as well. Many people just tend to have one trade, one area of work they do, and they stick with that their whole life. So he's a hunter. So she married him. She loves him. She's trying to do good, be a good wife, do her role in the family the best she can. So she even assists him, gives him food, cleans his equipment. But she doesn't tell him to go and kill. She doesn't promote that. She doesn't kill herself. And she has that clarity in her mind. She's differentiating between her intentions and her husband's. And maybe he has no other choice at that time but to do that job, otherwise he'll have no money and he can't look after his family. So occasionally there are those situations which are very challenging. Even maybe the husband does have the intention to one day give up killing, who knows? It's just he's unable to at that point. And the wife doesn't kill. So she can still practice and be a Sotapanna even though she's living very closely to someone who's not keeping the 5 precepts. His level of faith in Dhamma we don't know. It's very common in a family, one person has a lot of faith and practices and a person next to them in the family doesn't. Maybe they're totally against it. But if you practice more and more, you also notice the changing nature of people's minds. It's another aspect of wisdom. You're reflecting on impermanence, and maybe your good practice will pull other people up, at work, at home, or in your group of friends. So you have to be patient and keep practicing and trust in the goodness of your practice. And maybe over time the people around you may change themselves, because they can change. And the best way to help other people is through example. If you're a layperson, it's very hard to preach, to teach people and convert them to Buddhism. But if you set a good example, maybe people will take notice of that and they may follow over time, but it does take time. So that's the best way to carry on with life, is be a good example, try and put the teachings into practice yourself. And the people around you, I would say, through the power of good karma, the power of Dhamma, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, will start to notice that. And you see that over and over again in life. People who have practiced and their fellow family members or work colleagues or friends often recognize the good they're doing, even if they don't practice themselves. They say, oh, this is an honest person, kind person, and they generally give respect, because that's another fruit of keeping precepts, is you get respect from others. Practicing the Dhamma generally promotes wholesome, skillful Dhammas in the mind of the practitioner, but also in the minds of other people they encounter. So don't give up, just keep going. And make everything part of the practice. Ajahn, I have something to seek your advice on. The matter of taking urgent unpaid leave for quite a few times to take care of my children. I'm feeling guilty about it. Any advice? Well, I think bringing up children, especially young children, is a very demanding, challenging, time-consuming business. So it certainly doesn't surprise me if a parent of young children has to take time off work sometimes. Illness never chooses the right time to come, doesn't it? Your kid gets sick at the most inconvenient time and you have to help look after them. Your kids may have other problems, other issues to do with their education, their health, their well-being in different ways. So it's not surprising that there are all these demands for extra time and attention coming from your kids. Some employers are very sympathetic to that and you can talk about it and they're flexible. Others are less flexible, but if you've taken unpaid leave, you don't really need to feel guilty because you're not getting paid for the work you don't do because it's unpaid leave. It may have other effects on your job, your position in your employment. I guess in the long run it could become a problem, but if it's in the short run, unpaid leave, you're not taking much advantage of your company because you're not getting paid. So maybe it's okay if it's done with a sincere intention to help your kid for some reason. You feel you've considered it, you feel it's necessary, you're not malingering, wasting time. There's a genuine need to look after your kid in some way, assist your kid in some way. I think generally it should be okay. And the more effort you put into getting the people around you to understand what's going on, to know that you've got young kids, and if you're taking leave it's for a certain reason, and if you also put effort into the work you do when you do it, you're an honest, hard-working person, and you contribute to that job, whatever the job is, I think it should be all right, generally speaking. But there may be variations here. You have to see your employer, what they're like, the people around you, what they're like. The whole situation, if you have a partner, well, maybe you share the load, and sometimes your partner takes time off, sometimes you do. You just have to muddle through, don't you, with kids? I think with kids it's messy. There's a lot of muddling through. You can't do everything. Fixed time, regimented sort of program for the first 5-10 years of their lives. There'll be things that come up unexpectedly. Anyone who's got kids should know that. I don't have kids, but I know it, so I'm sure other people should know it as well. And hopefully your employer will be sympathetic, and you just do the best to communicate with them. See how you can adjust your life around this issue of kids and their unpredictable circumstances. I took the easy way out, no kids, so I don't have this problem. But I'm sure there is a way to deal with it using the Dhamma, mindfulness, wise reflection, good sila, gratitude. So if you're still employed and you manage to take this unpaid leave, then go back and work again when you can. Be grateful that you have that opportunity, that your employer, whether they know it or not, that you're able to do this. You know, always have gratitude to the people who help you or assist you, whether it's indirectly or directly. That will help as well. Because if you just assume you're entitled, you know, the attitude of entitlement puts people off. So if you've got an employer, you say, I'm entitled to this leave because I've got kids, blah, blah, blah. Well, they may still give it to you or allow it or not say much, but there'll probably be less giving if you are showing your gratitude and appreciation. So practicing loving kindness also helps. Loving kindness for your employers and work colleagues, loving kindness for your kids, loving kindness for yourself. See how you can develop that on an ongoing basis to help improve or preserve the good opportunity you have. Many things you can do with this. And hopefully your kids will grow up and appreciate your sacrifices. But don't rush to expect that. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Doesn't mean to say your sacrifices are wasted. And that's one thing parents sometimes forget. You sacrifice for your kids. They may not yet show much appreciation or recognize what you're doing. They just take it for granted because they're only little kids. Even when they grow up, maybe they don't seem to show much appreciation. But it doesn't mean to say the good karma you made of bringing them up, sacrificing for them, helping them is wasted or disappeared. It's still very good karma. And good karma that we do, sometimes it's recognized, sometimes it's not. That doesn't mean to say it's not good karma. It just means the causes for recognition, appreciation are not there, perhaps. But it doesn't mean to say the good karma hasn't been made and done and it wasn't worth doing. It still is worth doing. Next question. What to do when your pet gets old and sick and you're encouraged to put it down? Well, if you have a choice, generally speaking, I say don't put it down because that's killing, not keeping the first precept. And I know they always say, well, it's mercy killing, compassionate killing. The pet is in great pain and suffering and there's nothing you can do, so you might as well inject something to put it down. And many people will suggest that, and vets will tend to suggest that. But why not give the other way, the other direction a go and just say, well, okay, they are ill, but I'll look after them till the end, just as we would generally do with human beings. Maybe that's the best goal and the best sort of plan, is to just care for them until the end, even if they are in pain, struggling, suffering. You just care for them the best you can until they die naturally. I would recommend that approach to see if you can achieve that. I know every situation is different, every household, every pet is different, but I would always look towards the side of preserving life not killing, not deliberately, intentionally killing, but try to preserve life, minimize pain, but maybe counter the pain with a lot of love. And animals can also use painkillers as well, just as we tend to do with older human beings. We give them painkillers, but we tend to look after them, and that's increasingly more the case. Often people bring them home from hospital into a loving, familiar environment, and they may not have such a high level of treatment because they don't have the equipment and the doctors there, but they're happy. Again, this is a generalization, but I would aim more towards that approach with people as well as pets. And I know people who have raised lots of pets and never really had a problem where they've been forced to choose between slow, painful, torturous death and euthanasia. Nearly always works out that the pet will die. If they are in a lot of pain, often they die quickly. But you don't necessarily have to hasten that whole process and euthanize them. You can just care for them. That would be my recommendation. As I said, every situation is different, so it's hard to generalize. Generally speaking, with pets, they've fallen on hard times because they've been reborn as an animal. There'll be one or more of the precepts that they've continuously not kept in previous lives. Maybe they were once a human, and pets generally, because they're close to us, we look after them maybe for many years. We live together, breathe together, eat together, and so on. Quite often it is because they've been a human with a strong karmic connection to us before. Or sometimes it's an animal, again, it may have been a human before, but they've been an animal maybe for many lifetimes, but they're close to being reborn as a human. And that brings them to be close, physically close through a lifetime to a human. So pets are examples of that. They often have a close affinity with humans. And maybe when they die, maybe they're not yet ready to be born as a human, but maybe they are. So that's another reason why you might want to look after them right to the end, show them love and other wholesome qualities, because maybe they're going to come back as a human soon. Maybe they can help you next life. You're helping them this life, maybe next life they'll be helping you. Who knows? Next question. What should I do if I keep getting angry with other people? Laugh if you can. It's always good to put a smile on it. Laugh at yourself, laugh at the situations that make you angry, and nearly always later on you realize the anger was unnecessary. Tends to be a fast, quick-born reaction. A feeling comes up, at the very least some negative thoughts, sometimes negative speech and action. Anger often arises, it flares up quickly like a bushfire. But nearly always you do and say or just think things that later on you realize were unnecessary, regretful, destructive, stupid. So maybe later on you can laugh back at yourself. Or why did I get angry over that? Or what's the point of getting angry? You just suffer unnecessarily. Even if something bad happens to you, you're in pain from an injury, someone's insulted you, a mistake has been made, something's gone wrong. Still, the anger is like this additional suffering, an additional layer of suffering you're putting onto that experience. And when you're more mindful and sober up and kind of more calm, you look back, nearly always you'll say, what was the point of getting so angry? It didn't help anything. It only makes things worse. You suffer more the more anger you have. Suffer in your mind, and maybe even physically suffer. Someone today was saying now they get high blood pressure, and if that's combined with a mood of anger, it can be life-threatening for them. You can have a stroke or a heart attack. Sometimes, when you're younger and stronger, you hardly notice it. Oh, I get angry and then I recover quickly, we often say. But as you get older, maybe actually your anger could be life-threatening. So there's a lot more invested in not becoming angry, or if you do get angry, because it will tend to come up in the unenlightened mind, let it go quickly. Don't hold on. Forgive, let go, move on as best you can. Because it will take its toll on your physical well-being, your body, your health, and then in other ways, your relationships with other people, the world, the physical world. When we're angry, we damage things, we break things. Either because we lose our concentration and make mistakes, or because of the destructive nature of anger, we take it out on things. And sometimes we do it deliberately, don't we? To show we're angry, we break something. If you've ever lived with a plate breaker, then it's because they're angry, then they'll break the plate to let you know that they're angry. It's not that they need to break a plate, it's a sort of a way of reinforcing the fact, because sometimes people are angry on the inside and no one else knows, and they're not happy about that. And part of the effect of the anger is you've got to make it come out. So break the plate, thump the table, honk the horn, shout, all the things we do to show everyone else we're angry. Again, when you're sober and calm, you look back and you say, why did you waste time doing all that? Waste money, breaking things. Again, it's almost like fashionable sometimes, particularly wealthier people, it's fashionable to show how much anger you have and how much you don't care by breaking something expensive. So have a thought for the less fortunate, less well-off, maybe they could use those things. When you're angry and you damage things that are expensive, you're depriving someone else maybe of useful thing that we might use, of breaking plates. You break plates, and some people I know in my past have broken a lot of plates. It's like, well, you could open a restaurant with all these plates that have been broken in anger. Some people do it with regular, monotonous regularity. They break their plates. I knew one family who would have the Saturday night plate fight. Sunday morning, the piles of plates are coming out. Even the kids had to bring out all the broken plates and put them in the rubbish bin. So, we take it out on material things and occasionally make it bigger than it needs to be. And anger does that. It expands the mind with anger, fills the mind with anger, and then expands out into speech and actions. There's so many destructive consequences. You have to think about that more and more. And then there's the motivation not to get angry, just to let go, give it up. Even when they've treated you badly or things have gone wrong, you've had an accident, whatever, just let it go. It's much better. So focus on the benefits of giving away your anger, letting it go, being not angry in situations that would normally make you angry. You feel so much better. You're in control. Nothing is broken. If other people see you maintaining your control when you're in a situation that you shouldn't get angry, or normal people would get angry, people will tend to notice that. Oh, he's not getting angry. And if they're good people, they'll say, oh, this is a good thing. They'll recognize the effort you're putting in and the benefit of that. So think about the disadvantages, the harm of being angry. That will give you some insight. Think about the benefits of practicing non-anger or letting go of your anger. That will give you insight. Practice mindfulness, of course, mindfulness of what you say, you do, and even what you think. And then the preventative side, cultivate metta every day. Cultivate metta. Make a point of developing thoughts of loving kindness to other people, yourself and other people, every day. If you can, do it as a meditation, maybe first thing in the morning. And that's what the Buddha did. He started his day spreading metta to the world, seeing who can I help today, what good can I do today. Sometimes there's more, you can do more than others some days, but you make that aspiration, wishing others well, wishing yourself well, Is there anything I can do for anyone? Could be a word, could be an action, could be just a thought. And you see what you can do. And that will come out in your behavior. You'll get angry less often, or if you do get angry, you'll recover quickly, because you have a foundation of metta in your mind. So it's something you have to keep working at, keep developing, whatever anyone else in the world is doing. Some people will tell you you're stupid. You're not stupid. It's good mental health to practice metta. Dear Luang Por, thank you for the teachings. Is the attachment to a self the same as attachment to self-view? Is personality another Buddhist term? Excuse me. Is personality another Buddhist term for self? Are the 5 weaknesses of the mind residing in our view? Thank you for answering the questions again. Well, partly it seems this may be just subtleties of language, different terms used differently by different people, or different Pali, Buddhist terms are sometimes translated with different words by different people. So I think it's partly that. But generally speaking, is the self the same as attachment to self-view? Probably, because we often in language you say, oh, this is an expression of self, but equally you could say an expression of self-view. So the first first fetter of the 3 fetters that the stream enterer abandons, the first of 10 fetters, first 3 of 10 fetters, which bind the human mind, tangle it up with the world and rebirth and suffering. These are the things we have to unbind, untangle, unfetter, loosen, let go of. But one does it gradually because some of them are more subtle, more deeply ingrained than others. So the first 3 are the ones that you can see, understand and let go of first. Self-view is usually what we translate Sakkaya Ditthi as self-view, but sometimes they say personality view. But probably more common is self-view, and sometimes that's shortened to just attachment to self, the idea of a self, a permanent, solid self, seeing self in this body and mind, seeing the body and mind in the self. These are examples of self-view. And there can be subtle manifestations of self-view in different ways. As I said, you're seeing yourself in the body, or the body in you, in the self, and so on. There's plenty more to look into there, but generally speaking, self-view, identifying with the 5 khandhas as self, seeing them, viewing them as a self, something solid, something that just exists. And that because a lot of people just naturally will, through their conditioning, will naturally think like that. You know, I exist, I can think, of course I'm here, I exist, I'm here. Letting go of self-view or seeing through it doesn't necessarily mean you're saying there's nothing there at all. You know, there's a body here, you can feel it, see it. But it's the mind that mistakenly takes it as a self, as mine, me, mine, myself, is where suffering is triggered, isn't it? Body, in the final analysis, in the most basic sense, it comes from the 4 natural elements, earth, air, fire, water. From the earth through food, drink, breathing. We live and breathe in the world, but as an organism, you know, there's birth, there's aging, there's death. It's the same for every living thing in the world. It goes through the same kind of cycle. You can't avoid that or stop that. We try to develop drugs and chemicals to keep us alive longer and longer, and we do all kinds of things to try and stay young, stay healthy, stay alive longer. But in the end, we can't avoid old age, sickness and death. So it's the nature of a human body. But if you can see through self-view, it's not such a problem, is it? You realize the body is not me, mine, myself. It's not a being that should always be here, and if death takes this body away from me, it's a great tragedy. It's not a great tragedy, it's just nature. It's just the way things are. So you're changing your view about it, changing your view about yourself, the people you love, other people, and the world. The things of the world are still here, but you're changing your view. So this is a mental thing that comes through educating the mind to see the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and selfless nature of physical and mental phenomena. Things are conditioned. They arise and pass away according to causes and conditions. So it's bringing your mind to see that, know that truth, not just as an idea, as a theory, but actually witness it, observe it, and investigate it through your experience. You may abandon self-view in that way. As far as the 5 weaknesses of the mind, that I think you're referring to what we call the 5 hindrances, or the pancha nivarana, the obstacles to the mind settling down into wholesome dhammas, the practice of samadhi, developing states of calm, unification of mind, one-pointedness of mind, is hindered by these 5 things you're calling the weaknesses of the mind. So sensual desire, we'd rather think about sense objects, all the stuff we like, or the stuff we like but we're not getting, so we have frustration. Ill will, aversion, anger, hatred, sloth, torpor, apathy, dullness, lethargy, sleepiness, restlessness, anxiety, agitation of mind, worry, and then skeptical doubt, uncertainty. These are 5 groups of mental states which come up all the time, and they block your mind from settling down in samadhi, from being mindful, or from just being in a wholesome state. So it's not just when you practice meditation the hindrances come up and the rest of the time they're not there. It seems like that, and it's very difficult when you practice meditation because you feel like things are harder when you meditate than when you don't. But usually that just means when you're not meditating, you're not watching very closely, and the hindrances are running around very happy in your mind all the time. So even when you're trying to do something good, trying to concentrate on helping someone, you'll get bored, you'll get distracted, you'll get angry, you'll get sleepy. Whatever you're doing in life, the hindrances are there, ready to come up. So they block the mind from being in its best state. And you're saying, are they residing in our view? Well, yeah, you'll take these 5 hindrances as self-view. It's an expression of self-view, so that's why they're a problem, and that's what feeds them. You grasp hold of them, you attach to them, you cling to them, you react to them, and so you get anger and say, oh, I'm angry. And you say, oh, I'm an angry person, I'm no good. And your mind spirals out because of self-view, grasping hold of the anger in this case. Or sleepiness, I'm sleepy, I'm the sleepy person, and your self-view forms there, and you may indulge in your hindrances because of self-view. You just take them for normal. Oh, I always have sensual desire, always worry, that's me, that's who I am. And you're kind of feeding them, making stronger, making them come up more often. So they're part of self-view, they're part of the 5 khandhas which we take as self. There's a lot to look at there in your practice, but this is just talking in brief at the moment. Dear Luang Por, is it true that in this samsara means the endless round of birth and death, there is this vast amount of individual minds that go through the vicious cycle of rebirth? Not always that vicious. If you're reborn in heaven realm, it can be quite pleasant. And though this amount is massive, given that the mind is also permanent, it is still limited to that specific amount, and new minds will not be created. Is it true, is the question. So, are new minds created? That's probably a question for the Buddha, not for me. It's the sort of question that might explode your mind before you work out a logical answer, I think. You're working with a lot of unknowns. The universe is a big place. The number of minds filling this universe in every realm, the ones you can see, the ones you can't see, is a lot. Even the ones you can see, I mean, how many people are in the world today? We don't know. People have been born and dying all the time. Huge amount of quantities and unknowns there. How many insects who have minds are there? I wouldn't know. I haven't read the books, and even if I had read the books, it must be changing. Every second insects are being born and dying. So a lot of consciousness and mind to deal with there. Then if you add in realms you can't see, that you may take on trust. The Buddha said, well, there's hell realms, ghost realms, demon realms, heaven realms, Brahma realms. Well, there's a lot of realms there, including human and animal realm. That's a lot of minds already. Probably the figure is just already beyond our conception. Something with a lot of zeros after it. So whether there could be more or less, does the number of minds get less or more? It's another good question. Does it matter? Does it matter to your own practice for the end of suffering? Can you free your own mind from ignorance? Become awakened, enlightened? Maybe that's the first question to ask. If you have a wish for other people to become enlightened, well, that's a very wholesome wish as well. Does it matter however many minds there are out there? May they all be enlightened. May they all find peace. May they all be free from suffering. Good enough. And often you'll see Buddhist reflections, chants, they talk in those terms. They don't say, may all billion minds out there, ever expanding number of minds be enlightened. They say, may all beings, because it's so much easier to cope with. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy. It's good enough, isn't it? If you want to speculate on the numbers and whether the number's growing or shrinking, well, that could be your thing. But be careful. The Buddha said these kind of questions can really spin our mind out, confuse us, disappoint us, make trouble for us, make suffering for us. Rather than ending suffering, your doubts may take over and make you suffer more. Just one person's mind, we have these phrases, don't we? We say, oh, I'm in two minds about that. I like it or I don't like it. Even one human mind seems to be constantly multiplying according to kilesa, mental defilements. Our cravings, our attachments seem to be able to multiply all the time. So one human mind seems to be multiplying, dividing, separating, arising and ceasing. It can be quite confusing following one single mind or stream of consciousness. So you multiply that by billions, it's a lot of work. They say it's possible even for beings with very refined states of mind, high barami, like Brahma gods and bodhisattvas with great barami. Sometimes they can kind of split their mind so that they got a bit here in the heaven realm and then a bit goes down and is reborn as a human, makes merit, while the bit in the heaven realm is still there and there's a connection. Seems like on the level of science fiction, but this is how some of the teachers with great knowledge and experience talk about it. It's even possible for a being with a very bright, well-developed mind to kind of split off a bit of it and put it down there to be reborn as a human and then bring it back later as a conscious thing. I'll leave you with that one to think about. But whether the number of minds can increase, I would say with kilesas, probably it's possible, isn't it? Minds can just keep somehow developing through their ignorance and their attachment. They could just develop more numbers. Nibbana, though, the good news, Nibbana, the Buddha said, is like the ocean. It can absorb any number of beings. Any number of people can jump into the ocean if they chose to, but make sure you can swim first. But any number of beings can attain Nibbana, enter Nibbana. So that's the good news. There's no limit. So it's not like members only, closed door, you but not you. However, to get into Nibbana, to reach Nibbana, you have to fulfill the causes, which is develop the Noble Eightfold Path. But there's no limit. Anyone can do that. Anyone can move along this path, develop it until they reach Nibbana. So that's the good news. So in the end, maybe it doesn't matter however many beings there are in this universe, whether they're multiplying, shrinking in number. Anyone has that opportunity to develop the path towards Nibbana. And there's no limit of beings who can attain Nibbana. So we're finishing, like the real news, the evening news, we're finishing on a good note, a good story that Nibbana is there for all of us if we practice in the correct way. And I will leave it there tonight.